Now a more ominous story, and it comes from the UK, from Scotland, where a lot of trends that we wind up living with do begin. In Scotland, an ominously called Hate Crime and Public Order Bill, now under consideration, would allow the authorities to arrest people for things they say in their own homes at the dinner table. So why is a public order bill focused on what people do in private? That's a good question. And what exactly is hate speech, since everyone's against it? Does hate speech include praising a border wall? Well, according to the legislation, it would. Under this legislation, you would not be allowed to, quote, stir up hatred of any kind. You could be arrested if you did. In other words, disagreeing with people would be a crime if those people had power. So how long before we face laws like this in the United States? Possible. Pedro Gonzalez is an assistant editor at American Greatness. We're happy to have him on tonight. Pedro, thanks for coming on. So first, let's just define the terms, because I think it's helpful to know what we're talking about. What is hate speech?
Hate speech is whatever the people prosecuting you for hate speech say it is. And that sounds a little bit reductionist, but that's really what it comes down to. It is an entirely subjective standard that these people think society ought to be organized around. And if you disagree, well, you're going to prison.
So if you allow the people in charge to define hate speech unchallenged, and we're allowing that here in this country, then what you're doing is handing them power over your mind and crushing all dissent, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. This is very dystopian. This is right out of Minority Report. It's basically pre-crime. We need to know what you're saying in the privacy of your home so that those words cannot become actions, and we have to basically throw you in prison before you can act against some victim group. Now, this stuff only goes one way, of course. It's only ever directed at victim groups, and it seems to always work against white people, whether it's in Europe or the United States. It has the exact opposite effect, in my view. It's profoundly divisive because you're creating resentment in society for basically every group that's excluded from the protections of, because let's say supposedly the hate speech ideal is sincere. We want to protect everyone from hate speech.
Right.
It would be still wrong, but at least somewhat understandable. But it's not like that. Only some groups deserve protections from speech, others do not. And I think it inches us closer towards a kind of war of all against all by inculcating this kind of resentment in people, if it doesn't just crush them outright.
That is such a smart and subtle point. So what you're saying is a law purportedly designed to suppress extremism causes it.
Yes, absolutely. When you tell people that because of their immutable characteristics, being born white, for example, or something like that, that you need to be treated as a potential terrorist and that we need to know what you're saying in the privacy of your home when you're talking to your friends and family, I mean, that's either going to psychologically break you and make you kind of just a docile little automaton, which is, I think, what these people would love on the one hand, or it's going to drive you towards extremism, which I think they would also love, because every time someone acts out like this, when they've been just driven mad, it feeds their narrative. Like, see, here's proof. Here's a justification for what we're doing, and now we're going to ratchet it up a little bit more.
Well, why not just treat everyone the same and use the same standard for everyone? I mean, I thought that was the goal.
Right. Well, that's what good people think. And that would make too much sense, and it would be, I think it would be too easy, or not as contrived, I should say. I think it's hard for decent people, for good people, to look at this and see it for what it really is. Because again, on the surface, we're doing this to protect certain people, but that's not really what it's about. It's really about power. I think even calling it a double standard is mistaken. This is about enforcing a kind of hierarchy with the people that are creating these laws ostensibly to protect others. They're the ones obviously at the top of this. They're the ones that we need to give all the power to so they can keep the rest of us safe.
It's a very, very smart and too rarely noted point, and I appreciate this. Causes extremism, and it's really about power. That is exactly right. Pedro Gonzalez, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me.